We're emotional creatures. I'm just as emotional as the next person. But when it comes to making certain kinds of decisions and being analytical, I'm going to temporarily put my emotional brain to the side so I can look at the data, and then I can put my emotional brain back on. We know this, that success leaves clues. And what I mean by that is, with enough attention, focus, and ability to break down problems, you can take something and you can reverse engineer it. And I'm pretty confident in my ability that once I focus in on something, I'm able to solve the problem. Wherever my attention drifts and wherever I apply myself, I'm going to figure it out sooner than later. And I think it's not because I have some secret ability and magic or anything like that. It's a process. I think that it comes down to a couple of things. One is looking at things objectively, trying to remove the bias and emotional attachment that you might have, the preconceived ideas, and just looking at what is in existence and then trying my best to break it down. We've done full videos on this called the 5 ingredients. I kind of look at it as like, can I understand this in 5 actionable, meaningful, clear, and concrete steps? And if I can imagine that, then I've taken a complex problem, I've broken it into smaller bite-sized pieces that I can get my head wrapped around. The next thing is speed, aka velocity, and this is everything because it builds momentum, is I want to make sure if I have a hypothesis of what the 5 things are, I want to get up whatever version of that is as soon as possible so I can test and find out if the hypothesis is correct. Too many people falsely weigh the result and not the process. So what they want to do is they want to make one effort and make sure it hits every metric that is important to them. And so they wind up spending too much time. So whereas they might be able to launch one initiative, one guess at why it works, I will go in and I'll do it 4, 5, 6, 8 times. And in that iterative nature, it starts off really crappy and not good, but I learned so much in the process and the journey that by the time I get to the 7th or 8th piece of content or whatever it is I'm doing, it's going to be way more refined and way more informed because of the data that I'm getting. And the next thing is it's the ability to stay in the dip. The dip is where things get hard, when it's difficult, where you want to quit. And this really tests your resolve and your commitment to getting through it. And this is where most people quit. I embrace the dip. I live in the dip. I start inside the dip. If you have attachment and expectations on yourself about the outcome, how this is supposed to go, if you go into it asking yourself, are red M&Ms the best tasting M&Ms in the world, and you only look at that, you're going to blind yourself to the objective data that you're going to see. I think you have to approach this kind of like the way a scientist would do this. I'm talking about using maybe part of your gut, your instinct, and marrying that with data. So I almost begin just like everybody else on an emotional level. I have a hypothesis, I have a theory, I'm going to test this. Where I may differ from some people is once I test something, the data that you get back, and let's just talk about the content game in terms of Instagram. The data I'm going to get back is engagement, comments, follows, shares, saves. Those kinds of things are ways to measure the performance. They don't tell the entire story, but they tell a story. And as long as we have data to support it, we can say, like, in my heart, I thought this was going to work, but the data is coming back negatively. The detachment allows me to look at that and say, as much as I love this, as hard as I worked on this, as much as I want people to love this piece of content, the data suggests otherwise. So I'm going to adjust. And this is very much true. This is not anecdotal. This is for real. Like when we were in our 2-week content challenge and I was putting out posts on Instagram, I put too much into the carousels. I over-taught and made things more complicated than they needed to be. So the data told me that. And so the hypothesis is then, I wonder if it has to be lighter. This is too meaty and people aren't on Instagram for this kind of content. So I started to thin it out. And I got it to a point in which I found that sweet spot. And each iterative cycle allows me to have more data, more measurements, more metrics, so that I can then decide I'm moving in the right direction or I'm moving in the wrong direction. Imagine yourself blindfolded. You remember like the Marco Polo game in the pool and you yell out Marco and everybody else yells out Polo. That's like you bouncing a signal out into the world and them reflecting back to you so you have a better sense of position. Imagine if you play that game in a pool and you're only allowed to yell Marco once. That's the difference there. And imagine if you thought they're all in front of you, but when you yelled out Marco, their polo was behind you, and you insisted they were in front of you and somebody was cheating, you would also be moving in the wrong direction. I think personally, we're emotional creatures. I'm just as emotional as the next person. But when it comes to making certain kinds of decisions and being analytical, I'm going to temporarily put my emotional brain to the side so I can look at the data, and then I can put my emotional brain back on.
Hi, my name is Greg Gunn, and I'm the producer of the Futur Podcast. And yes, we do have a podcast. In fact, we've been having one for years, and that's exactly why I'm here talking with you. You see, it's really good, and I think you should listen to it. If you like what we do here on YouTube, then you're gonna love what we do on the podcast. You'll get to hear intimate conversations and personal stories from some familiar faces and others you might not know about yet. Plus, you can listen to it while doing something else and you won't miss a thing. So, if any of that sounds interesting to you, go visit thefutur.com/podcast or find it on your favorite podcast listening app. I hope to see you there.